What do you mean you need more space? I don't understand. What about all the fun times we've had together? All those awesome new toys that I've bought you to play with. Bushes, sway bars, H&R coilos. And let's not forget those awesome StopTech big brakes. And yes, there was the comment that your ass looked a little bit fat when you were wearing those 265, 35, 18 Hankook RS4s. That was honestly meant as a compliment, like fully sick man. How can you say after all that, after all we've shared together, that you need more space? The brakes are rubbing. Why didn't you say so? We can fix that. Boy, I feel sheepish. G'day everyone, my name's Michael Taylor and welcome to the 64 Motorsport YouTube channel. One of the challenges of working on cars is overcoming obstacles, especially when you've installed several new mods to your E46. Getting those parts to fit and work together sometimes requires additional work and modification. A lower spring perch or larger calipers can now create rubbing issues. To overcome this and gain a few extra millimetres of clearance, installing a wheel spacer can often buy you the extra breathing room that you need. In an ideal world, you'd choose a big brake kit or suspension setup that gave you the clearance you need, or you buy a set of wheels in a size and an offset that didn't create rubbing issues. But in the real world, doing mods to your E46 is all about emotion. Those wheels that you've always dreamed about don't always come in the size and offset that you need. Or you might be like me, and that big brake kit that suddenly came on special is just too good an opportunity to pass up. These are real world choices. When these obstacles present themselves on your E46 build, that's when this simple mod steps in to save the day, allowing you to get the brakes, suspension and wheel setup that you've always wanted, match them all together and still have some space. No more rubbing issues. I've chosen the H&R TRAX 10mm wheel spacers for my E46 project. The reason I've gone 10mm is I need about 7mm clearance for my Apex FL5s to clear the StopTech big brake caliper. I don't actually need a spacer on the rear, but in order to maintain that fatter look at the back with the wider wheels, I've decided to install the same size 10mm spacer on the back. Let's get these onto the workbench, get them opened up so we can have a look at what comes in the box. Oops, might need to make some space first. The 10mm spacer comes with its own hub-centric ring to replace the one that's on the wheel hub. Now that I've raised that issue, let's run through a couple of the other safety points in relation to using a wheel spacer. The first thing to mention is because you've now added the distance between the wheel face and the wheel hub, you're going to need a longer lug bolt. I've already opted to replace the lug bolts with wheel studs and lug nuts. When I ordered those, I ordered them in a size or in a length to cater for up to a 10mm spacer. So I'd already pre-planned on the possibility that I may need a spacer at some point. Don't just use your normal wheel bolts when you're installing a spacer because you won't get sufficient thread into the wheel hub and that's going to cause some real safety issues as you're driving down the road. The next thing is that BMW rely on a hub-centric ring on the wheel hub to ensure that the wheel is properly centered on the hub. It doesn't rely on the wheel studs or the wheel bolts to do it. When you install the spacer, you're actually covering up some of that hub-centric ring. If you're installing a spacer up to about 5mm, you're generally okay. For a wheel spacer between 5mm and 10mm, you're going to need what they call a hub adapter. If you've got a 10mm or above spacer, generally they will come with their new hub-centric ring. Always check to be sure before ordering that it does have that, because if it doesn't, you're going to need that hub-centric ring adapter to allow the wheel to center itself. These are only some basic guidelines, so if you'd like to learn more about the safety precautions and the safe use of using a wheel spacer on your E46, Turner Motorsport have a really good article on their website about wheel spacers and the correct procedures to follow. Please, if you've not used a wheel spacer before and you'd like to know more about the safe use of a wheel spacer, check that article out before ordering your new spacers. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's get down onto the ground and start getting these puppies fitted where they're meant to be, eh? Because I've installed fresh new brake rotors I know that the mating surface between the spacer and the hub is nice and clean and smooth. I can't stress this strongly enough. You want to make sure you get any signs of dirt, grease and rust buildup off this surface before you install your new spacer. Get yourself a wire brush or a wire brush onto your drill. Give it a really good clean. Once you've cleaned it up, then use some brake cleaner and a rag to sort of wipe it down to make sure that there's no dust or anything left behind. So that's all the preparation done, and now we're ready to slide on our new spacer. Now I also need to apologise because old mate across the road has decided to mow his lawns today, so he's got the whippersniffer going like crazy. Sorry about any background noise which might be creeping up there. These H&R spacers are specifically designed for your BMW. So they've got the hub-centric ring and also the bolt pattern to match your 5-stud 120. Slide it in and then make sure that it's sitting really securely against the hub, which it is. Now the moment of truth, we put our new wheels on. That's one wheel done. 1, 2, 3 more to go. How about we just time lapse it and I'll give you a squiz once we're all finished. For those in the audience who are a little bit curious as to how I worked out what size spacer to use in the first place, I went to the auto parts store and I picked up a couple of these 3mm universal spacers. I would certainly not at all recommend actually using these. So I loaded these on. I started loading on simple washers until I got the clearance that I wanted. Once I had that worked out, I simply got my verniers, measured it and worked out I needed roughly about 7 to 7.5mm. So that's how you can work it out too. Get a couple of cheap spacers or just keep loading the simple washer on until you get the clearance and then select a spacer to suit. Okay, I've got all 4 spacers onto the car and this is the moment of truth. Now I'm going to know whether I'm going to have rubbing issues between the tyre and the fender. But certainly in terms of my build, this is a really big moment. Fair dinkum, this will be the first time my E46 has had all 4 feet on the ground in 3 years. Come on, 1, 2, 3. I can't tell you how much my little heart is tickering along at the moment. So let's grab the trolley jack and see what she looks like on the ground. There you have it guys, that job done, and I'm fair dinkum struggling to contain my excitement after 3 years of having the E46 up on jack stands and having to look at it every time I've walked into the garage. Having it finally sitting on the rubber and looking pretty good, I am super stoked. A couple of things to mention. When I installed the H&R coilovers, I just left them at the factory ride height. In other words, at the settings as they came out of the box. The whole point of opting for coilovers rather than the cup kit was the standard ride height for most of your spring and shocky kits was just a little bit low for me, and because I've gone a fairly wide or aggressive setup, particularly at the back, I wanted to get the fender clearance maybe 1 centimetre above the top of the tyre, whereas with your cup kits it sort of sits almost level. I wanted a slightly higher stance at the back and a lower, more aggressive stance at the front. By utilising the coilovers, I can dial in the ride height to give me the exact look that I want. I'm going to let this whole thing just sort of settle for a week, roll it backwards and forwards a couple of times, and then I can do the adjustments on on that. But the other thing I can do is get underneath the car and start doing a final torque on some of the suspension components that I've replaced. As you can see by the footage, there's now not a lot of clearance underneath the car, so getting underneath there to tighten those things up and torque them to spec is going to be difficult, but I've got a plan to overcome that issue. So there's going to be a couple of really exciting videos coming up on getting this suspension dialed in, and it'll tie in a lot of this information that I've been giving you in my videos over the last 6 to 12 months. For now, I'm just going to pour myself a bourbon and possibly sit in the garage for an hour and just savour this moment. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget, smash that like button because it really helps my channel when you do. If you'd like to watch the last video I made on the performance upgrades for my E46, then how about you click and watch this video here. But you can also watch the video that YouTube recommends for you by clicking and watching this video here. Thank you very much for watching. I've really enjoyed your company today and super excited about sharing this moment with you. Until we meet again, look after yourselves, stay safe, and TTFN.